Hey everybody, this is Adam D'Angeli from the Rescue Michigan Coalition, and tonight we have a surprise stream. I was not counting on this. No email about this. It was off the cuff. I don't know if we're going to get a lot of guests in the audience tonight, but we'll see. Be happy to interact with the chat if you guys show up. We're actually going to be streaming on YouTube tonight as well, since we're not going to be talking about the forbidden topics. But the big story that we want to cover tonight is talking about the political implications of the leaked Roe v. Wade decision, which may or may not actually stand, although I think it's very likely that it will. But we'll talk about everything. We're not a law show, but I do want to talk, and we're not a pro-life organization and certainly not a pro-abortion organization, but I do want to at least touch on that and talk about the Rescue Michigan Coalition in relation to some of the issue topics we don't always talk about. But the big thing that I do want to talk about in depth tonight, which I think you will not get anywhere else, is going to be talking about what the political implications of this decision will be on both federal legislation and state legislation and state politics. We have a lot of people that watch this show who are running for office, who are going to be wondering, like, how is this going to play in my district? What's this going to do to the turnout? What does this do to my overall chances of victory in November or potentially August? So we're going to get into all of that. But I think first, before we even get to that, I do want to also point out there's another big thing going on tonight, and that's the Ohio U.S. Senate primary, where I personally, and obviously Rescue Michigan never weighed in on this. We don't weigh in on things going on in other states, but I will just tell you personally, I am extremely excited to see J.D. Vance in the U.S. Senate. He will join Rand Paul, and I guess I'll give you Ted Cruz. Maybe I'll give you Ron Johnson. Maybe, no, I'm not going to give you Mike Lee. But anyway, someone who will really serve with distinction in the U.S. Senate. And at the last time I looked, which was only 2 minutes ago, Vance was pretty comfortably ahead in the polls with 43% reporting. He was basically 5-4 against his nearest opponent. Daniel says Ted endorsed Mandel, though. Yeah, well, no one's perfect. I don't always, I don't think it's necessarily proper to hold people's endorsements against them. There's all kinds of reasons why that can occur. But anyway, that's a subject for another time. Point being, hopefully by the end of the stream, we'll know the final result of the Ohio U.S. Senate primary. But for those who don't know about J.D. Vance, he appears to be one of the most thoughtful federal candidates who really is unflinching in being truly America first. And that means speaking out about the damage to the American economy that this conflict that U.S. involvement in the Ukraine conflict is having, among other things. A really serious, thoughtful person who won Trump's endorsement despite having been critical of him before he ever entered politics, which I give him credit for that too, honestly. I've always said I think Trump could use some good constructive criticism from his friends. So I'm glad that Trump was able to get past that in this case and endorse him. And let's see. But I think if J.D. Vance wins, it's a win for the U.S. Senate. It's a win for the conservative America First movement. And it will be a win for Donald Trump, and a real contrast to see when Trump endorses great people versus when Trump endorses very questionable people, like a certain TV personality in Pennsylvania, to think of one. Dave Stout says, Mike Harris winning big in the 43rd special election. Great. Unsurprising. That was a Republican district. I'll be very curious if anybody has any results in the R.J. Regan race. I have not looked at that at all. I'm not even quite sure where to look. I guess I don't know if that's in Kent County or Allegan County or both where those results come in. But obviously, for those who don't remember, that was our big, we got a lot of news coverage over this because he came on our show and made some unfortunate remarks, which, despite being unfortunate, were worse, taken vastly out of context and dishonestly portrayed in the mass media, forcing us to defend him, which I did. And I'll be curious to see if he survived the media onslaught and went on to win that race for the special election for that district. I don't know if he's even actually filed to run for the seat for the full term. Stout says Regan was losing according to MERS. Well, there you go. You hate to see it, but hey, them's the ropes, folks. If you're running for office, you got to be careful. You got to be meticulous in what you say. And if you're supporting candidates, you got to vet them carefully. And you got to see what's in their past. You can see our video on vetting candidates at rescuemichigan.com. And we cover all that stuff. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about Roe v. Wade. Before we get into the current events, I think I should at least set the table a bit about Roe v. Wade in general and my personal opinion of it, and Rescue Michigan's posture, because I'm speaking, obviously, I've got the Rescue Michigan Twitter, was it username, I guess? Whatever it is there. So, since we're kind of speaking for the organization, look, I have strong personal opinions on every issue under the sun. I'm an all of the above guy. I have opinions about gun rights, about abortion, about immigration, about taxes, about the Federal Reserve, about foreign policy, about civil liberties, about the First Amendment, about lockdowns and vaccine mandates and mask mandates and all of that. And the reality is, as a political organization, we can only take on so many. Because if you take all of those different issues, you find that not everybody feels the same way about all the issues. And I don't want to divide our members. We started out talking about principally lockdowns, mandates, and election integrity. We've broadened, I think, a little bit, talking about like critical racist theory and a few other things here and there. But the reality is, you get two conservatives into a room and they're going to find something to disagree about. And that's a problem, because if you're campaigning on all these issues to all of your members, they find one thing they disagree with and they're done with you. They're not going to want to donate money to a cause that they think is not with them on one issue. And it's not like we're all the same on every single one. There are some people who are broadly conservative on everything, but not always on everything. And I probably am on everything personally, but when I worked for Gary Glenn's campaign, he was the president of the American Family Association of Michigan. And so we knew that being pro-traditional marriage and being pro-life was going to be a big part of his campaign. When we polled voters, we were surprised to find that about 1 in 3 pro-life voters were not pro-traditional marriage, and about 1 in 3 people who were pro-traditional marriage weren't pro-life. And if you survey the public, what you find is the majority of people are not 100% pro-life and not 100% pro-abortion either. They're somewhere in the middle. And they don't necessarily know exactly where, but most people think it should be legal in cases of rape and incest. I happen to disagree. Most people don't think it should be completely lawful for fully formed, mature babies that would easily survive if they were not brutally murdered. So if you're running for office, taking a hard position on one side or the other is not going to be good for you no matter who you are. And the issue is going to be how, as candidates, you can leverage the extremism of the Democrats' position versus the purity of your position, which you may or may not have. I hope you do, and even if you do, you might not want to market yourself that way, depending on how it goes. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's back up here. Let's talk about Roe. Let's talk about the issue. We'll talk about the Supreme Court case. Then we'll get into the politics. So first off, I think, I think it should be the case that everyone should agree that Roe v. Wade was a disgraceful, embarrassing decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. Of course, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't really understand it. But what was at issue in the Roe versus Wade case was not, should abortion be legal? In fact, the Supreme Court deftly dodged that issue. They said, we're too stupid to decide when life begins. That's not our purview, which is weird, because when life begins is when rights begin, right? If you can be killed when you're in the womb, you don't have rights. You don't have the right not to be murdered by your parents. So what they're saying is, we can't tell you that a developing baby in the womb is a person with rights or not. That's for science or the politicians to decide or something. So the entire Roe v. Wade argument was based on this contrived right to privacy, which is A, not really in the Constitution, and B, not really applicable to that issue, and has never been applied to any other issue in the same way ever since. It was, oh, women should have the right to make their own medical decisions. That is an inalienable right we've made up because it's not anywhere in the Constitution. So therefore, since we can't tell you when rights begin, therefore we can overturn restrictions on abortion in all 50 states because there is a woman's right to privacy. That was the legal essence of the Roe v. Wade case. It was always an embarrassment to any serious person considering the law. You can be pro-abortion and still recognize that that was legal mumbo jumbo gibberish. So there was that issue. The other issue that came in big in this case is, and this came up also in the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh, and I would assume, I don't remember, but I'm sure it was also with Neil Gorsuch, is the principle of stare decisis, which means once the court decides something, they don't want to have to revisit it and change what the decision was. And that decision is based on an important idea in law, which is that once the courts have made a decision on an issue of controversy, one way or the other, their mind's made up, and at least now people can move forward and say, now we know what the environment is. And that's especially important in all kinds of business-related law, case law, like insurance law, areas where if the law is unclear, people need clarity. And the idea of a partisan court reversing the opinion of a previous partisan court because the partisan balance changed, that's bad for everybody. Because now a business can't operate in a stable legal environment anymore. If what they're doing is legal today and would be illegal tomorrow, they've got a big problem. So that's why the courts have sort of always decided, my phone just beeped, let me turn the ringer off. That's why the courts kind of always decided that we really, really, really want to avoid ever changing our view on anything because it creates uncertainty. And again, abortion's a different issue. And the exceptions have been these different issues. They're not like commonplace questions about business litigation or things like that or criminal justice. It's like Plessy versus Ferguson, separate but equal. That decision, the court said that was a horrible decision. It was a mistake. It promoted terrible racial injustice, inflamed racial hatred. It had to be reversed. We had to go to Brown versus Board of Ed, which overturned Plessy v. Ferguson and created integration. Now, of course, the left doesn't say this, but they actually want to go back to separate but equal, but never mind that for now. Anyway, so that was what these justices were grilled on is, what's your take on stare decisis? Meaning, we want you to basically assure us you're not going to touch Roe v. Wade. Apparently, Lisa Murkowski was very upset that this decision is reportedly coming out because she was led to believe. And the funny thing is, this is another interesting issue, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but I've always found it extremely infuriating and frustrating. If you talk to candidates for judge, they will never tell you their opinion on anything. They'll always be extremely, extremely, extremely vague. Like I remember I was at University of Michigan when it was Bob Young, who was, I think at the time, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court running for re-election, and a candidate, what was her name? Colleen O'Brien, I think it was. There's a bunch of conservatives at this candidate forum, and people are asking them questions the same way you ask candidates for state rep or whatever. Well, what do you think about this? Maybe it was abortion, maybe it was the Fourth Amendment, maybe whatever it was. And their answers always were the same thing. It always was, I can't tell you because I'm not allowed to tell you what I'm going to rule on cases. And it's like, well, yeah, but I wasn't asking how you're going to rule in a particular case. I want your general thoughts on this. And they just would shut it down and say, nothing. I'm not going to tell you anything. I can't tell you anything. And that's the same act they pull in the confirmation hearings in the Senate Judiciary Committee. Same thing. And I think it's overused and overbroad. I think, it might be different for a Senate confirmation hearing where the only real question they're supposed to be considering, although it's not, is are they qualified to be a judge? But when you're seeking the public's vote for office, I think the public has some right to know what your positions are on things generally. And there's a way to do that without saying how you feel about any particular hypothetical case or a real case. But they always overuse that and make excuses. They use the excuse that, I can't say I'm going to rule on a particular case to get out of saying how they're going to view on things generally. So anyway, all right, all that aside. So It was leaked last night that it's going to be a 5-4 decision, with Roberts having an alternative. Well, it's going to be a 5-4 opinion, and Roberts might have an alternative opinion that says he thinks we shouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade, but there was this other case that he would uphold, the Mississippi case, I think, but he wouldn't go so far as to overturn Roe v. Wade. So it would be a 5-4 overturning of Roe v. Wade. And of course, we don't know who actually leaked this proposed, which is not final. It could still be changed. And that leaves the interesting question of who leaked it. I think the most important question to ask in this matter, not that it really matters anyway, but the most important question is who benefits from it leaking? What would be the intended, anticipated effect of it being leaked? And the most obvious, the most simple explanation is somebody wanted to leak it so that they would have massive protests that might persuade one of the conservative justices to change their mind. That's the obvious motive. And there's no other obvious motive. So there's been, I've seen people on Twitter saying it actually might have been a Republican that did it for some reason, or it might have been a hacker for some reason. And those decisions don't make a whole lot of sense. The only obvious motive for an early release of a Supreme Court opinion is to try to influence the opinion. And they're not getting the 4 Democrat judges to vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. The intention was for it to inflame people, as has happened as predicted. There was flash mobs in Washington protesting the decision. So will the Supreme Court ever get to the bottom of who the leak was? I hope so. I was encouraged when I saw it was going to be, there's a Supreme Court marshal who was directed by Chief Justice Roberts to run the investigation. There was rumors earlier it was going to be the FBI. And that, if you're trying to get to the bottom of a political scandal, the FBI is the last people you call to get to the truth on that. So, but whatever, that's all incidental. The real question is, let's assume the Supreme Court sticks to their guns. I think they will. In fact, if anything, I think they're going to be even hardened in their opinions based on this leak. This was seen as unprecedented, although if you saw Rescue Michigan's Twitter feed, you'll know it was not entirely unprecedented. In fact, I'll pull up the image. This was amazing to me because people in the media have been saying this has never, ever happened before. And it actually did happen once before. Here is when it happened. Roe versus Wade. Here's the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. Personal and private memorandum to the conference. The attached story from Time is a gross breach of security of the processes of the court and goes to the very heart of the integrity of our processes. It appears that the admonitions of justices to law clerks have fallen on deaf ears, at least as to some. Had one of my clerks even talked with this reporter or any other reporter in these circumstances, as some law clerks, in the plural, have done, I would dismiss him or them forthwith. It is plain to me that the article would not have been written without access to the draft of the opinion. We have an obligation to find the source. If we sit placidly by, the impression may get around that we are tolerant of this kind of professional misconduct, and I have no intention of being tolerant any longer about repeated breaches of the confidential matters of the court. As soon as all are available, I will call a special conference. So there you go. This actually has happened before. I'm not sure it's ever happened since then, but funny how that all works. Anyway, all right, let's talk about the politics of all this. Let's assume that the decision that was leaked is the decision that will stand. Roe v. Wade is overturned. This has huge implications federally and in all states, and certainly in Michigan. Let's do federal first. That's a little bit simpler, and then we'll get to Michigan. Federally, a lot of issues that we thought we had resolved amicably may now come back. For example, we thought we had stopped the Democrat destruction of the Senate filibuster. Mark my words, there already have been, I've seen them, renewed calls to gut the filibuster, which requires a 60-vote majority to pass legislation. The Democrats already gutted it for judicial appointments, which turned out to be a dumb move for them because that led to Trump's Supreme Court appointments. So Thank you, Harry Reid. They may do it again, which in the long term will probably benefit Republicans again, too, because we'll probably be in the majority next year. But in the short term, it means passing every crazy thing the Democrats want to do while Joe Biden is president. And they're not going to be able to undo them when Republicans take the House and Senate, because Biden will still be president and be able to veto them. And in the long term, that's actually probably a bad thing overall, because the nature of the legislative process is that it makes it difficult to pass radical legislation, makes it difficult for either party to do the most cherished things that it wants to do, because you got to get to 60 votes in the Senate. And that's usually a good thing. Not always, but usually. It makes highly controversial stuff more difficult, and more often than not, we're on the losing side of that. Because the controversial stuff that we want to do, there's enough resistance among the Republican caucuses alone to stop them. So we never get what we want, but the Democrats always get what they want when they're in charge and they have the ability to do these things. So don't be surprised if you see a renewed push to gut the filibuster. Not much we can do about that here in Michigan. If you'll recall, the two holdouts were Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema in West Virginia and Arizona, respectively. So those are going to be hugely important battles for conservatives to fight in those states. But that's not us. There's nothing we can do. Our U.S. senators are hardcore liberals, 100% on board with Biden. I saw Debbie Stabenow at Nancy Pelosi's disgraceful press conference, where she told all kinds of ridiculous lies about the Roe decision today. So there's no changing her mind on that. But you guys should all be aware of this, because this is a serious thing. They may yet return to try to gut the filibuster, and they may even now have the pressure on Manchin and or Kyrsten Sinema. There's one other issue this may impact as well. I'm trying to remember what it was, because it occurred to me earlier, but there was another one. Daniel Law says they contrive they don't have Manchin or Sinema to end the filibuster. Not necessarily. I mean, not yet. And they held firm up to this point. They may not continue to. And never trust any politician, much less a Democrat politician, much less a Democrat politician with extreme leverage over their party and the ability to get a lot of things they want done if they give them something. Don't count on that, Daniel. What was the other big one? It'll come to me. Let's talk about state politics. So first off, for those of you who don't know, abortion is actually completely illegal in Michigan right now, but for Roe v. Wade. So if Roe v. Wade is overturned, abortion instantly becomes completely illegal in Michigan. And that's the end of that. Well, that should be the end of it. It's not. You have a few problems here. Number one, Dana Nessel has, I know in the past, and probably again in the present, said she will refuse to enforce Michigan's abortion law. Let me check on Dana Nessel's Twitter feed real quick, just to see if she's commented on it lately. I looked last night, but it was late. She probably wasn't tweeting at the time. She's attacking Matt DePerno for saying he will prosecute women and their doctors for abortion with no exceptions. Bad political move by Matt DePerno, but what a shock. Okay, here we go. She retweeted today her tweet from April 19th. Here it is. I've made it clear I will not defend the 1931 law making abortion a felony in Michigan and invite the legislature to intervene and defend the case. So far, total silence on their end, despite their routine efforts to intervene in my lawsuits. Actually, that's a weasel statement, because the issue is not her defending the 1931 law. The issue is if Roe v. Wade's overturned, the 1931 law is back in action. Question is, will she prosecute abortions in Michigan? Of course she won't. The question is, will any lawmakers attempt to impeach her for willful neglect of duty? It seems clear to me. That's what that is. Now, maybe that's going a little far, because you could say, well, it's the Attorney General, they have limited resources, they have prosecutorial discretion, blah, blah, blah. But if you flat out say, I will not defend Michigan's anti-abortion law, well, I guess it gets us back to another fundamental issue. And this is a problem in the legislature. This is a problem in Congress as well. For all the talk about being pro-life, Republicans have never done the one pro-life thing they could actually do to overturn Roe v. Wade themselves, even when they were in power in all the chambers. They had the House and the Senate and the White House for 2 years under George W. Bush and 2 years under Trump. All they had to do was pass the Life at Conception Act, which defines life at conception. That resolves the question the Supreme Court was too chicken to take on, which is, when does life begin? When do your rights as an individual begin? And Congress never did it, because it'd be so bad for us in the election. And we'll talk about abortion in the election coming up in a moment here. But abortion is a felony in Michigan to perform, does not make it murder, because that's not what the statute says. It says it's a felony to perform an abortion. It doesn't say that you're actually committing a killing of a child. So it doesn't automatically trigger that this is now a case of murder or any other kind of unlawful killing. So something the legislature could have done, never did, even when they had both chambers of the House, the Senate, Governor Snyder, never did that. And that's too bad. But abortion will be an issue this year, potentially an issue on the ballot this year, literally. How will this affect the outcome of the election overall? I would say not a great deal, because the people who are passionate on both sides of this issue are wholly owned subsidiaries of their party. That's, by the way, why we never got the Life at Conception Act passed, because the pro-life movement is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Republican Party. So the Republicans say, sorry, we don't want to vote on this. It's going to hurt us in the elections. And the pro-lifers go, okay, sounds fine. But the result of that also is people that care about it, that are pro-life or pro-abortion, the pro-lifers are diehard Republicans who will never vote Democrat, and the pro-aborts are diehard Democrats who will never, ever, ever, ever vote Republican. So those are not swing voters. And I would say, for the most part, I don't see any evidence to say that they're unreliable voters. We're not talking about stoners turning up at the polls for once because weed's on the ballot. That's not going to happen over this. Some people are saying there's going to be a bunch of riots like the Black Lives Matter riots. No, there won't be. It doesn't have the same emotional charge as like race issues and police violence, justified or not, whatever your opinion is on that. There won't be riots. I mean, there'll be some demonstrations with a teeny bit of violence maybe in Washington, but there won't be very many elsewhere. But what there might be in Michigan is a ballot proposal to legalize all abortion. What they're going out and collecting signatures for right now. Let me see if I can find it here. Let's see, Michigan Board of State Canvassers. There is a petition circulating. Let me find it here. Let's see here. Unlock, secure my vote, right to vote. Reproductive freedom for all. Okay, here we go. So here it is. This is the Michigan Reproductive Freedom for All petition. Will they gather the signatures? I don't know. We'll see. But here's their petition. A constitutional amendment to establish a new individual right to killing your baby, including the right to making care at all decisions about pregnancy, such as prenatal care, childbirth, postpartum care, contraception, sterilization, abortion, miscarriage management, and infertility. Allows states to prohibit abortion after fetal viability unless needs to protect a patient's life or physical or mental health. Forbid state discrimination and enforcement of this right. Prohibit prosecution of an individual of a person helping an individual for exercising rights established by this amendment, and invalidate all state laws that conflict with this amendment. So the invalidate all state laws that conflict with this amendment part, that's striking down the prohibition on abortion. So you would have to, so this little clause here in the middle, allow the state to prohibit abortion after fetal viability unless needed to protect a patient's life. That's a SOP, because the constitutional amendment itself would overturn the prohibition on abortion. The default state would be all abortion is legal at all times up to the moment of birth, and who knows, maybe even beyond. And there are some leftists who are that crazy. They're saying, like, yeah, I mean, What's the difference? If you're allowing them to abort them the day before they're born, why not the day after? Because that's the whole principle of abortion. Is well, this kid's never going to be anything. His parents are poor. That's why they put Planned Parenthoods in all the inner cities. That's why they abort. What is it? 79% of them are black children. Yeah, the kid's going to be a drug dealer and a failure anyway. So just snuff the poor little life out. That's the principle about abortion. Or as Senator Rosemary Bayer put it, I wasn't ready to have a child at the time, so I made my decision to wait. Because she couldn't possibly have raised a child at that young age. It might have inconvenienced her. She might not have been a state senator today. These are the repulsive arguments people make for abortion. Is the kid's life doesn't matter? It wouldn't be anything anyway. It's not good for the mother. So let's just kill the damn thing. Don't worry, it won't feel any pain, not at all. Although of course they do, even before they're viable. Anyway, that's the petition. So if they get the signatures for the petition, it will be on the ballot. As a candidate, you have a choice in this. You can avoid the issue altogether and hope your Democrat opponent won't beat you over the head about it, and you'd be a fool because they will. Or you can go on offense. And you can say the pro-abortion people have made absolutely no bones about it. Not in their petition to legalize all abortion at any time in Michigan, and not anywhere else. Look at every pro-abortion organization in America. Look at NARAL. Look at Emily's List. Their position is clear. They do not support any candidate that does not support all abortions at all times in all circumstances, period. And you can cast them as the radical on this. Or you can let your opponent cast you as the radical. And we can lose. And more babies can die. That's pretty much where this ends here. Now, a couple of other, let me make one really, really important point here. I want to talk about messaging. I mentioned earlier that most Americans are not absolute on one side or the other on this. That's mostly a failure of the pro-life movement, because they actually destroy their entire argument altogether on this all the time over the question of rape and incest, because they're too chicken. Because how do you answer that when your Democrat opponent's attacking you and saying, in fact, this is how Todd Aiken lost his U.S. Senate career. It's for, remember Claire McCaskill beat him up over saying, someone asked the guy, do you believe abortion should be legal even in the cases of, it should be illegal even in cases of rape and incest? And he says, well, if it was a legitimate rape, which, of course, taken out of context, sounded horrible, and he got beaten to death over that politically. He actually was making an important point, which is that if abortion was illegal except in cases of rape and incest, you would have a whole lot of women filing false allegations of rape as the pretext for an abortion. And that's really dangerous. It's dangerous from a legal perspective, dangerous for the people that would be put in jail, dangerous for how men and women would regard their sexual relationships, if that was a concern. Very, very scary. Very scary. Nevertheless, Aiken guys, this not be out of him. But here's the bigger issue. Here's the more fundamental issue. If rape and incest are legitimate exceptions to abortion laws, then what is the basis for the abortion law at all? Right? Because think about this. If you're pro-life, isn't the most fundamental understanding about this that there's a baby in the womb that has rights? So how does those rights go away for the baby's rights because of the crimes of the father? I mean, that's what the rape and incest exception actually is. It's saying you can kill a child because the father's a rapist. And conversely, by the way, folks, those of you running for office, that's your answer if someone asks about that rape and incest exception, is you can't kill a baby because the dad's a rapist. You can't hold the child accountable for the father's crimes. You have to keep the emphasis on the child. That's why the left puts the emphasis all on the woman, the mother, not the woman in the womb, the mother, the having the abortion. It's about the child's rights. If you haven't seen this, look her up. Rebecca Kiesling. She's a woman from Michigan who was conceived in rape and would not have been born had it not been for Michigan's law against abortion. She's a national speaker. She's gone around the country. Unfortunately, she's a never Trumper, but we'll forgive her for that. But no, I met her when I was working on the Hill, and I remember her telling me face to face, I'm so tired of being thrown under the bus by the pro-life movement. Like, my life doesn't matter. It would have been okay to go ahead and kill me for your political expedience. And she's now married and has her own children, her children that wouldn't have been born if she wasn't born. These are the kinds of stories you guys can talk about. But that's the important thing. When it comes up, I would not emphasize it in your campaign, but people might ask you about it. And I would say stick to the basics of it. Roe v. Wade was a bad opinion. Tucker had a good take on it. I'm sure a lot of the people in the right-wing media are taking this take now too, that all they actually did was democratize the issue. I mean, all overturning Roe v. Wade does is return the decision to the states on what they choose to be their abortion laws. And in states like California, abortion will still certainly be 100% legal. I'm not a fan of that argument, by the way. When I worked on the Ron Paul campaign, this is my first entry into politics. Daniel says it's a victory for federalism. I'm just going to get to this. Is why I think this is a very poor argument, Daniel. When I worked in the Ron Paul campaign, this is in 2007. I was first getting involved in politics. And by the way, I come from a pro-abortion household. My parents are both pro-abortion. They're liberal Democrats. It was actually Ron Paul who changed my opinion about this. But a lot of Ron Paul supporters were like me. And that was their argument, was Ron Paul is not, he doesn't say we're going to ban all abortions. We're just going to leave it to the states to decide. And that's what overturning Roe v. Wade actually did. But as it turns out, that was not an accurate representation of Ron Paul's view. He was the sponsor of the Life at Conception Act that would have banned all abortion in America. It made it a murder, a capital offense in all 50 states. But besides not being his position, it's also a flimsy argument. Because then you're not taking a position. Then you're just saying, yeah, let the states decide. Well, if you're running for state rep or state senator or what have you, you would be the person making that decision. I would argue that the Supreme Court hasn't done enough. I think it is a fundamental question the courts should have to resolve. When does life begin? When do your rights begin? How can a court not know that? Well, what do rights mean if we can't define who they apply to? And if a court can decide that, a legislature certainly should. So I think if you're going to take an opinion on this issue, don't try to take a politically safe position, because you're not taking a politically safe position. You're taking a position where you're subjecting yourself to attack from both sides. Where the pro-aborts will say he's anti-abortion, the pro-life people will say, oh, he wants to leave it up to somebody else. No, I think if we're going to win this issue, and by the way, if this petition gets to the ballot, that will be the task. And the Democrats in their foolishness have made it easy for us by making such an extreme proposal, what they chose, with no concessions, not for the third trimester, not for the heartbeat, not for 15 weeks, for nothing. The total legalization of killing unborn children. That is what might be on the ballot this year. And that's what Democrats advocate for. Get them on record advocating for that. This is where your volunteers can come in handy, going to Democrat events and asking them, well, what do you think about even at 15 weeks? What do you think about even in the third trimester? You would support abortion then too? Because they either have to say yes, and then they're on record taking that extreme view, or they say no, and they've crossed the line with all of the pro-abort organizations. So that's the question that Republicans are going to face on this issue is, can they find the nerve to go on offense and put the Democrats on defense by showing how extreme their views are and exposing them and getting them on record and going to the voters and saying, look, I don't know what your views on abortion are personally, but what's at issue here is the complete legalization of killing babies. That's what it is. And abortion is out of favor. I mean, it's not. I mean, there's so many alternatives. There's adoption. There's contraception. Things that we didn't have as much as we did 50 years ago when Roe v. Wade was first passed. So these are important discussions that people should have. And I'm talking about the disparate impact it's had on the black population, I think, is an important issue. They wouldn't be so small minority if not for abortion. So I think, one message might be if someone has pro-abortion sympathies and is saying, well, you don't think abortion would be completely illegal in Michigan, do you? You might say something like, well, I certainly don't think it should be completely legal. I think it's a very difficult conversation we should have. I think it's totally improper to put that on the ballot as a yes or no question. If they had, well, do you defend Michigan's pro-life law? I guess you have to say yes then. I would. But there's no answer that's going to please everybody. It's a controversial issue. That's why lawmakers avoid it like the plague. They don't want to take opinions, especially not votes, on issues that are highly controversial. But the problem that Republicans have everywhere is they don't embrace their role impacting public opinion. They view themselves as vessels for it. Whatever's popular now, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to change public opinion by speaking the truth. No. It's like, well, if you don't, who will? Doug Davis says, I think Italy does something where they remove the child premature and put it up for adoption when healthy and able. That could be discussed as a possibility. Yeah, I mean, I would. That's another angle. It's another deflection point a candidate could take. Is we need to do more to make adoption more accessible. We need to do more to support children. There's all kinds of angles you can take that way. Doug says Biden said it was a child today on air. Yeah, I mean that's the essence of it that we have to get to. And someone was on the news today talking about this from Live Action. Is when people find out how brutal abortions are, and almost always they should, it changes their opinions on it. I wonder. I'm going to see if I can pull up my YouTube video. That's actually the very earliest video on my YouTube channel was back when I was in the legislature. I saw this hearing in Lansing, and it was so repulsive. Let me see if I can play it for you guys. This is the kind of thing that people need to see. Here we go. Yeah. All right, let me pull it up here. Hold on one second. I just got to get the video up, and then I got to make the screen work. Let's make this happen here. Wait. No, this isn't it. Hold on. Okay. All right, folks. One moment. Here's the video. And all right, here we go. This is from 2019. This is an abortion doctor explaining how the procedure works. So here we go.
And appreciate your testimony today. We just heard that 1,777 dismemberment abortions were performed in Michigan in 2017. How many did you perform that year?
So I don't have exact numbers with me, but I do perform dilation and evacuation abortions.
Well, perhaps what you could do for the committee and for all of us here is kind of explain that process. What does the mother have to do to prepare, and how does the procedure go? And I'd like some detail in the step-by-step process, if you would.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to provide that. So before any procedure, a patient is counseled on just like any other.
Hey, Tony, I see you say you're getting an echo. Let me try to do something about that. I'm not sure I can. I don't know what's causing it. I think it might be feeding back to the microphone somehow. Let me see. Tell me if this works.
Other medical procedure, the risks, the benefits.
Did that work, or did you hear nothing at all? Hey, folks in chat, did you hear that? Was it better for that couple of seconds? Let me know in the chat if that was better. You know what? This is only a 2-minute clip. I'm just going to let it play. Oh, that was better? It did work? Okay. All right. Let me rewind it then. I'll do it again. Funny thing is, I can't hear it now, but here we go.
And the alternative.
Let me rewind it.
and appreciate your testimony today. We just heard that 1,777 dismemberment abortions were performed in Michigan in 2017. How many did you perform that year?
So I don't have exact numbers with me, but I do perform dilation and evacuation abortions.
Well, perhaps what you could do for the committee and for all of us here is kind of explain that process. What does the mother have to do to prepare, and how does the procedure go? And I'd like some detail in the step-by-step process, if you would.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to provide that. So before any procedure, a patient is counseled on, just like any other medical procedure, the risks, the benefits, and the alternatives. And then the procedure is explained in the informed consent process. So it is our medical duty to talk to the patient about risks of complications of the procedure, as well as alternatives such as parenting, adoption, if those options exist. Then the patient typically, depending on the gestational age, goes through a process of cervical ripening where the cervix is made softer or opened, often using something called laminaria. And then the patient goes through the dilation and evacuation procedure where the fetal parts are removed using forceps or grasping tools until the uterus is completely emptied.
A follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. And when you say the fetal parts are removed, is that done in any particular order, and are they all accounted for when the process is done?
So it's done in accordance with medical standards to what is safest for the woman. So it is safest to try to grasp the fetal parts that are closest to the opening, the bottom portion of the uterus. So it's done in the order that makes the most medical sense for emptying the uterus in the way that is safest for the mother.
You didn't answer the question about, are all the parts accounted for when the procedure is done?
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Yes, all of the parts are accounted for when the procedure is done.
And you do that part too?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
So yeah, there you go, folks. That's it. Just rip the baby out front to back. That's all there is to it. that was a laminarium or something you mentioned. That's like a wooden spoon. That's a D&E abortion for you right there. Rip the baby out piece by piece. This is what a lot of voters don't understand. They don't know what abortion actually is. So the question is, well, first of all, I mean, it's gonna fall on the pro-life organizations to educate them, but it also will help a great deal if the candidates do. So I don't know what else I have to say on this, folks. I can't remember what the other big issue was in Washington. There was the filibuster. That too. That was the other one. The filibuster. No, wait, that was the one we talked about earlier. Yeah, the filibuster might be in check. If I think of the other one, I'll put it in the description. But I think I've said all I want to say about this issue right now. Obviously, we don't know what the U.S. Supreme Court will finally do. As I say, I think they're going to stick by their guns on this. They're not going to want to be perceived as bending to the mob. Certainly Brett Kavanaugh shouldn't, but we'll see how that goes. But anyway, folks, the news is reporting J.D. Vance has won his race. His opponents have conceded. So cheers, everybody, to an improvement in the U.S. Senate. That is a great thing. Tony Parton said she didn't talk about how they crushed the skull. Well, she didn't say it that explicitly, but yeah, we just use pliers just to tear the parts out one by one, and then we account for all the parts and make sure we got all the baby parts out of there. We just go, whoever's closest to the opening, we start there. So head, feet, genitals, whatever. Yeah, rip. Sick and disgusting, and totally evil. So let the Democrats run on that. As long as Republicans have the nerve to speak the truth about this issue, it's not going to help them. It's going to help us if and only if we have the courage to speak out, speak the truth, and to go on offense and not play defense and not play deflection and not play. I'm not talking about that because it's not an issue for me. I don't talk about roads. No, if the voter wants to talk about abortion, you're talking about abortion. Anyway, Dave Stout says, at the moment, it's a nail biter of a race between Glanville, the Democrat, and Regan, the Republican, in that seat. But probably the best area for the Democrat is not in yet, so we don't know. Look, folks, I don't know what the outcome's going to be. I'm not going to keep the show going all night, nail biting for the results, but I will just say this: if Regan loses, you can all thank the Michigan Freedom Fund for spreading lies about what he said, for giving the media fodder for his opponents, and he's not. The Republicans will retake the seat next year for sure, but nonetheless, their majority gets that much tighter in the House. That's bad news for conservatives. That means we have one more Democrat vote in the House. It makes it so that partisan legislation is that much harder to pass. Obviously, the governor can veto partisan bills, but it still gives us the opportunity to make her veto things. Every seat counts. Of course, the majority seat counts the most, but with a 3-seat majority, you don't want to lose even one. So, too bad. But that's just the way that goes. So, all right, folks, unless you guys have anything else in chat you want to talk about, I'm going to call it a night. It's been, wow, we've been going for almost an hour now. So, thanks again for all you guys do for liberty. Daniel says we do add Mike Harris. Well, yeah, but we don't really add him because the former representative in that seat was a Republican. So we get a Republican over a vacancy, but it was a vacancy created by a Republican who sadly passed away, whereas the Democrat seat's a pure pickup for them. So, yeah, we get one more Republican, but again, we could have had one more. So, not a good thing all around. And another reminder that when it comes time for the establishment to tell you about party unity, remember, unity is a one-way street to them. They're happy to tell you to unify when their candidates win. And I'm not saying Brian Regan or RJ. I keep saying Brian Regan because Brian Regan's a comedian, but RJ Regan, again, not our candidate, but he was a guest on our show that the media lied about, the Michigan Freedom Fund lied about because they were sore that their candidate didn't win the primary because Regan had more support and he knocked on doors. And it's a shame when this happens, folks. You hate to see it. So, but just remember, when the establishment comes knocking and tells you to support the next Mitt Romney and John McCain, you can tell them to pound sand. All right. Good night, guys. Thanks again for all you for liberty. Oh, I forget. This time I finally remembered. If you like this kind of content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube, although you won't see very many of our videos on YouTube anyway. Subscribe to us on Rumble. We're there much more often. It ends up the Rumble stream tonight. I will upload this video to Rumble as well. But if you like this kind of stuff, share it, send it around, please. That's how we get the word out. That's how we inform the grassroots. That's what we do. And I really should get better about reminding people about these things. Thursday, May 12th, we have a campaign school in Livonia. Go to rescuemichigan.com for details on that. Those next 2 days, Friday and Saturday the 13th, there's a big election integrity summit in Detroit. We'll be there. And then Sunday, we're doing a campaign school up in Gaylord. So if you are running for office, I strongly encourage you guys to check those out. So, all right, guys, until next time, thanks for all that you do for liberty. Peace.